Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are jumping into some really crucial source materials, all centered around this concept we're calling invisible walls. And this material, it really forces you, the listener, to look past just the surface of success and failure in society.
That's absolutely right. I mean, for too long, when we talk about how a country's doing, right, the conversation kind of stops at the economic stuff.
Yeah, GDP, income gaps.
Exactly. GDP, income disparity, maybe unemployment rates. But our mission today, really guided by these insights we've looked at, is to move past those raw statistics. We want to analyze the subtle, often structural barriers that stop people, especially young people, from even getting to the starting line, let alone finishing the race.
It completely changes the frame, doesn't it? It forces you to ask, is a society truly measured by, how much wealth it piles up overall? Or is the real measure, the deeper one, whether every single person has a genuine equal shot at using their talents?
And that difference, attention, that's really the core of what our sources are exploring.
And maybe the most striking part, if the source material is right, is that these barriers, these walls, they're often invisible, especially to the people who actually have the power to, tear them down.
That's the paradox, isn't it? It's profound.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. We've all seen the charts, right? The income gaps.
Yeah.
That's the sort of obvious economic side of inequality. But these sources, they argue the problem goes much, much deeper than just money.
Oh, it really does. The defining thing here, it's an inequality of, recognition and access. It boils down to who society even chooses to see, Who gets a platform? Who's actually given the tools they need to have a chance at succeeding? If you're not seen, well, you can't be heard, and you certainly can't climb any ladders.
And what I found so interesting was the description of how society actually builds these walls. It's not always like some conscious evil plan. It can be an unconscious process. Society starts sorting people based on things that really should be neutral.
Things like where you're from, your gender, maybe just your postcode, your zip code.
Right. And then those labels just harden. They solidify.
They stop being just labels and they become real constraints. The sources literally call these classifications the foundations for these invisible walls. And they're not built from bricks, obviously, but entirely out of ingrained prejudice, stereotypes, expectations. Think about how a name on a resume, or maybe the university someone went to, acts as this unconscious filter in hiring. That's a wall. Right there in action.
So the core mechanism then is that privilege.
Yeah.
It kind of blinds you to how the system is actually designed. Is that it?
That's a big part of it. And it leads directly to that critical paradox the sources highlight. The walls are invisible to most. If you happen to be on the, let's call it the advantage side, right? If things have generally gone smoothly for you, why would you even assume the path is blocked for other people?
Yeah, you wouldn't naturally think that.
Exactly. You'd probably assume the difficulties others face are, down to them, lack of effort, maybe lack of talent. Because your own journey didn't have those same kinds of structural roadblocks.
And that failure to even see the obstacle.
That's the most powerful ingredient, really, in keeping the cycle of exclusion going. It lets the whole system just stay there, unchallenged.
Now, to make this idea, which is quite abstract, feel more real, the source material shared a really powerful example, a grounding moment. It was a visit to a school in a pretty low-income neighborhood.
Yeah, I remember reading that. It was such a stark juxtaposition. The material describes walking into these classrooms and immediately seeing the spark in the students. The intelligence was there, the curiosity, just immense potential. The talent was undeniable, just sitting there ready to be nurtured.
But then you look at the environment, the actual physical space around that talent. The sources go into detail. Leaking roofs, science textbooks that were like a decade out of date.
Wow.
High teacher turnover because good educators either couldn't afford to live nearby or they just felt completely unsupported.
So you see the system itself actively, almost physically, choking that potential. You've got these kids who are clearly bright, academically gifted maybe, but their library is just full of hand-me-downs. Meanwhile, just a few miles down the road, other students have got state-of-the-art science labs, access to tutors.
And their access to that quality education, which we all know is foundational for their future.
Yeah, the key.
It's determined purely by, the lottery of where they happen to be born, which neighborhood.
And that, the material argues very strongly, is the ultimate contradiction of justice.
Right. We claim we live in a society of equal opportunity.
We say that all the time.
But if a child's entire future path is basically set by the local tax base of their neighborhood, Well, that principle feels pretty hollow, doesn't it?
It does. The system isn't just failing them, it's actively punishing their potential before they even get started.
And this is where the conversation shifts, I think.
Hmm.
It moves from just being about, a moral failing.
To economic necessity, absolutely. The sources are really blunt here. They conclude, talent exists everywhere, but opportunity does not.
That line really stopped me. Is the source essentially arguing that by ignoring this structural stuff, we're literally making our whole economy, well, less efficient?
Yeah.
That keeping people out is actually an economic loss, not just ethically wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Unequivocally. Think about the cost. The cost to society as a whole. Every idea that gets excluded because the person with the idea wasn't sane, every potential entrepreneur who never got the right education to launch their business.
Every scientific breakthrough that maybe never happened?
Exactly. Because the brilliant mind behind it was stuck behind one of these invisible walls. That diminishes everyone. We are effectively, willingly impoverishing ourselves by suppressing talent simply based on someone's origin or postcode. We're choosing to operate with just a fraction of our potential brain power, our potential workforce. It's madness, economically speaking.
Okay, so once we acknowledge these walls exist and we see the cost, what's the way forward? How do we start dismantling them? The sources do pivot to solutions, and they start with something that sounds simple, maybe deceptively simple. The first step is awareness.
Awareness is definitely the essential starting point, yes. But the sources push it further. It's not just about passively being mindful. It has to be actionable awareness. It means recognizing your own structural advantages, your privileges, whatever they might be, and then actively sharing them, using that advantage to create space for others.
So it's not just opening the door.
No, it's holding it open, making sure others can actually walk through it after you.
Okay, that makes sense. And that naturally leads to the bigger picture actions, right? The institutional level changes. The sources list 3 key areas needed for demolition work, let's say. Let's dig into those. First up, fair education policies.
Right. And this one's complex, no doubt, because it often involves redistributing resources. The sources really advocate for making sure that funding and educational resources follow the students and their actual needs, rather than just being rigidly tied to a postcode or the local property taxes, which creates huge disparities.
So, like if a student needs special support or language resources.
They should get them. Regardless of whether their school is in a wealthy area or an under-resourced one, it means actively trying to level the playing field to compensate for those existing structural disadvantages.
Okay, that leads directly into the second point, which is huge for careers. Recruitment processes. Specifically, processes that prioritize equality of opportunity. Now, when people hear that, sometimes they worry about quotas or lowering standards. What kind of mechanisms do the sources actually suggest for taking bias out?
Yeah, it's less about quotas and more about interrupting those unconscious filters we talked about earlier. So things like implementing blind resume reviews, at least early on, where you remove identifying factors, name, address, maybe even graduation dates for a bit.
Anonymize it initially.
Exactly. And it also means shifting the evaluation, moving away from just looking at credentials, which are often linked to prior opportunity, right? And focusing much more heavily on demonstrated skills, actual potential, maybe through practical tests or tasks. It forces organizations to judge what someone can do, not just where they seem to have come from.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Shifting from status to actual skill.
Mm-hmm.
And the third action point. This moves beyond policy into something more like culture. Social solidarity.
Social solidarity is like the glue that holds the other efforts together. It means actively working together across different community lines, recognizing that this fight against exclusion, it isn't just for the benefit of those who are currently marginalized.
It benefits everyone.
It's for the collective good.
Mm.
The sources use this analogy. If one part of the social body is unwell, the whole body just can't function at full capacity.
And this connects to a really powerful reframing of inclusion in the source material. They really stress that inclusion is not supposed to be seen as an act of generosity. It's not charity.
That distinction is absolutely vital, because if we treat inclusion like it's generosity, well, then it's optional, isn't it? It becomes something the powerful can just decide to bestow or withdraw whenever they feel like it.
Right. Conditional.
But when you define it as the essence of justice, well, then it becomes a fundamental requirement for a functioning, fair society, like needing courts or laws. It's non-negotiable.
And they also make this compelling case that actually maintaining exclusion is kind of self-destructive. The quote was, "Exclusion wears down not only those who are excluded, but also those who exclude.
Absolutely. Think about the energy and resources, intellectual, political, even financial, that go into maintaining artificial barriers. When you do that, you limit your own perspective. You stifle innovation within your own group. You suppress new ideas. Plus, exclusion breeds resentment, instability, distrust, all things that are corrosive to a healthy society.
Whereas inclusion,
Inclusion does the opposite. It opens the door to collective growth, to resilience. The true strength of a society, the sources argue, lies in how deeply it enables everyone, every single person, to reach their potential.
that realization really should shift how we think about community, about policy, everything. So to kind of summarize the actionable steps the sources lay out for you, the listener,
Mm-hmm.
it really starts with simple observation, just noticing who seems to be left behind in your own circles, your workplace, your community.
Mm-hmm. And then reaching out, listening, really listening to their experiences, trying to understand.
And then, crucially, acting together, working to dismantle the specific structural barriers that you start to see.
And this brings us right to the final thought, the sort of motivating takeaway we want to leave you with from this material. Because it's easy, isn't it, to feel overwhelmed, to wait for some huge top-down government program or massive reform to fix everything.
Yeah, it feels too big sometimes.
But the sources offer a different perspective on where change actually begins.
They argue that change doesn't start with those grand gestures, those abstract policies necessarily. It starts with the small, conscious choices you make every single day.
Who do you choose to mentor? Who gets a chance in your hiring process? What local institutions or initiatives do you support? What conversations about fairness or bias do you refuse to just let slide?
So the moment we recognize those invisible walls,
Yeah.
whether it's in our workplace, our kids' school district, our social scene,
That's the moment. That's the time to start tearing them down.
why?
Because the fundamental principle woven through all these solutions is beautifully simple. When we lift someone up, we all rise together.
That's the standard, perhaps, to measure our actions against this week. When we lift someone up, we all rise together.
A powerful thought to end on.
Thank you for diving deep with us into this really essential material today. We'll see you next time.